There's a gymnasium, packed, silent. A young nanny stands alone in the center, tears streaming down her face. She's been humiliated, destroyed. The bullying has gone too far this time. The crowd watches, some smirking, others uncomfortable but silent. No one moves to help the nanny. No one dares. Then footsteps echo through the gymnasium doors. Slow, deliberate. A figure emerges from the shadows. The whispers start. Is that? The man steps into the light. Bruce Springsteen. The boss himself. He walks straight to the young woman, the nanny who's been broken by cruelty. What happens next will change everything, because sometimes courage isn't about being fearless. Sometimes courage is standing up when everyone else sits down. This is the story of a nanny, a legend, and the moment when a gymnasium full of people learned what real strength looks like. He began to play The Ghost of Tom Joad, his fingers finding the familiar chords, his voice filling the gymnasium with a song about the forgotten, the overlooked, the ones who traveled hard roads seeking dignity and hope. As Bruce sang, Maria felt something shift in the room. The song wasn't just words and melody, it was a mirror held up to everyone present. It spoke of struggles they had never known, of dignity in the face of dismissal, of hope that persisted despite every reason to surrender it. Emma reached up and took Maria's hand. Jake leaned against her knee. Sophie climbed into her lap. They didn't understand all the words, but they understood the feeling. They understood that their Miss Maria was being seen, really seen, for the first time in this place. When the song ended, the gymnasium was silent for a long moment before applause began, tentative at first, then growing stronger. Bruce transitioned into Working on the Highway, transforming the mood from contemplative to celebratory, and several children began clapping along. "You know," Bruce said between songs, his fingers still moving over the guitar strings, "I've played in stadiums full of thousands of people. I've played for presidents and kings. But some of my favorite shows have been in small places like this, where music can remind us of what really matters." He looked at Maria. "Maria, do you sing to these kids?" Maria blushed deeply. "Sometimes, lullabies mostly, songs my mother sang to me." "Would you sing one with me?" Bruce asked. "Oh no, I couldn't. Please, Miss Maria," Sophie exclaimed from her lap. "Sing the butterfly song." "The butterfly song?" Bruce asked with interest. Jake piped up. "It's a song she made up for us, about how caterpillars become butterflies. She sings it when we're sad or scared." Bruce's eyes lit up. "Now that I have to hear. Maria, would you teach it to me?" With trembling voice, Maria began to sing softly, in a mixture of English and Spanish, a simple melody she had created one night when Jake was afraid of starting first grade. It was about transformation, about how something small and overlooked could become something beautiful and free. Bruce listened intently, then began to accompany her on his guitar, finding the chords that matched her melody. By the second verse, he was harmonizing with her, his rough voice blending surprisingly well with her clear, sweet tone. The children began to sing along, knowing every word. Soon, other children in the gymnasium were moving closer to the stage, drawn by the simple beauty of the moment. When they finished, Bruce set down his guitar and stood up, offering Maria his hand to help her stand as well. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said to the room, "you've just heard something more precious than any platinum record. You've heard the sound of real love, the kind that doesn't care about bank accounts or social status or where someone was born. The kind of love that shows up every day, that wipes tears and noses, that stays up all night with sick children who aren't even her own." He turned to Maria. "You asked these folks what's next? I'll tell you what's next. What's next is recognizing that people like Maria Gonzalez are the backbone of this community. They raise your children, they clean your homes, they tend your gardens, they serve your food. They do it with dignity and grace, even when that dignity isn't recognized or returned." Principal Johnson, who had been standing at the back of the gymnasium, finally stepped forward. He was a tall, thin man in his 60s who had run Rumson Academy for 20 years. He cleared his throat. "Mr. Springsteen is right," he said, his voice carrying clearly. "I want to apologize to Miss Gonzalez and to the Morrison children. Family Day is about celebrating the people who love and support our students. It's clear that Miss Gonzalez is very much a part of the Morrison children's family." He looked directly at Mrs. Henderson. "And I'll be having a conversation with our staff about what kind of values we're really teaching here." Bruce played for another hour, a mix of his classics and children's songs, even letting Jake and some other brave kids come up to strum his guitar. Maria remained on the stage, no longer an outsider, but a guest of honor, the children constantly checking to make sure she was still there, still smiling, still theirs. As the event wound down, Bruce packed up his guitar and approached Maria one more time. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" he asked quietly. They stepped aside while the children ran to gather their projects. "Maria," Bruce said, "I know what it's like to feel like you don't belong, like you're not good enough. I spent years feeling that way, even after I'd made it big. But here's what I learned. The people who make you feel small, they're the ones who are really small inside. They're scared, insecure, empty. But you're none of those things." He pulled out a card and handed it to her. "This is my manager's number. I'm starting a foundation for immigrant families, for the working folks who keep this country running. We need someone who understands the struggles, who knows what it's really like. The job's yours if you want it. Same pay you're making now, but with benefits, respect, and the chance to help other families like yours." Maria's hands shook as she took the card, but the children would understand that sometimes loving someone means showing them they can fly, Bruce said gently. "Besides, from what I can see, you've already taught them the most important things. You've taught them kindness, compassion, and courage." Before Maria could respond, the Morrison children came running back, their arms full of their projects. "Mr. Springsteen! Mr. Springsteen!" Jake called out. "Will you sign my butterfly display?" Bruce laughed and knelt down, pulling out a Sharpie. As he signed Jake's display, Emma's family tree, and even Sophie's dress, at the 4-year-old's insistence, he said to them, "You 3 take care of Miss Maria, okay? She's pretty special." "We know," Emma said solemnly. "We've always known." As Bruce prepared to leave, the gymnasium erupted in genuine applause, not the polite, obligatory clapping of before, but real appreciation. Several parents approached him to shake his hand, but he waved them toward Maria instead. "She's the one you should be thanking," he said. "She's the real rock star here." The ride home was quiet, each of them processing what had happened. Sophie fell asleep in her car seat, clutching her now autographed doll. Jake stared out the window, occasionally touching the signature on his butterfly display, as if to make sure it was real. Emma held Maria's hand over the center console. "Miss Maria," Emma said finally, "why were those people so mean to you?" Maria considered her answer carefully. "Sometimes, mi amor, people are afraid of what they don't understand. They're afraid that if they see others as equals, they might lose something." "That's stupid," Jake said bluntly. "Yeah," Emma agreed. "You're worth more than all of them combined." Maria felt tears prick her eyes again, but these were different tears. These were tears of validation, of being seen, of being valued. When they arrived at the Morrison house, Richard's Tesla was in the driveway. Unusual for a weekday afternoon. Even more unusual, Catherine's Range Rover pulled in right behind them. The Morrison parents hurried out of their vehicles, their faces etched with concern. "Maria!" Catherine called out. "We heard what happened. Principal Johnson called us both." Richard looked genuinely distressed. "Maria, I am so sorry. We had no idea you were facing this kind of treatment." "It's okay, Mr. Morrison," Maria began, but Richard cut her off. "No, it's not okay. You've been caring for our children for 2 years. You've been more present in their lives than we have, if we're being honest. And we've let you face discrimination and cruelty alone." Catherine knelt down and hugged each of her children, really hugged them, not the air kisses she usually bestowed. "Principal Johnson told us everything. How you stood up for Maria, how brave you all were. She stood and faced Maria, and for the first time, Maria saw real emotion in Catherine Morrison's carefully Botoxed face. "He also told us that Bruce Springsteen called you the backbone of our family," Catherine said softly. "He's right, you are. You've been raising our children while we've been absent." Richard cleared his throat. "We've been talking on the drive home. Maria, we want to make this right. First, we're doubling your salary, retroactive to when you started. Second, we're providing full health insurance for you and your family. Third, we're setting up a college fund for you, if you want to pursue further education." Maria was speechless. The card from Bruce Springsteen seemed to burn in her pocket. "And most importantly," Catherine added, "you're not just our employee, you're part of this family. Really part of it. We're going to make sure everyone knows that." Emma, who had been listening intently, spoke up. "Does this mean Miss Maria can come to all our school things, like officially?" "Yes," Richard said firmly. "It means exactly that." "And she can sit with us at the country club?" Jake added hopefully. "Absolutely," Catherine said, and there was steel in her voice. "And if anyone has a problem with that, they can take it up with us." That evening, as Maria tucked each child into bed, they clung to her a little longer than usual. "Miss Maria," Emma said sleepily, "Bruce Springsteen was right. You are doing holy work. Where did you hear that, mi amor? He said it. He said taking care of children is God's work, and that's what you do. You take care of us." In Jake's room, the 6-year-old was still wide awake, his butterfly display prominently placed on his nightstand. "Miss Maria, do you think I'll transform like a butterfly someday? You already are, mi niño. Every day you grow, you learn, you become more yourself. Will you be there to see it?" Maria hesitated, thinking of Bruce's card, of the opportunity it represented. "I'll always be part of your life, Jake. Always." Sophie, half asleep, mumbled, "Love you, Miss Maria, you're my best friend. Love you too, pequeña mariposa." After the children were asleep, Maria found Richard and Catherine in the living room. Something else unusual. They were typically in separate spaces, Richard in his office, Catherine on her phone. "Maria, sit down," Catherine said, patting the couch beside her. "We need to talk." Maria sat, her hands folded in her lap. "We've failed you," Richard said bluntly. "And we've failed our children. We've been so caught up in maintaining our lifestyle, our status, that we forgot what really matters." "You've been here every day," Catherine added, "while we've been everywhere else. Board meetings, charity galas, business trips. We provided for our children financially, but not emotionally. You've been doing that for us." "They're wonderful children," Maria said softly. "It's been an honor to care for them." "Principal Johnson sent us a video," Richard said, pulling out his phone. "Someone recorded Bruce Springsteen's speech. Maria, we had no idea what you've been enduring in our name." They watched together as Bruce defended her, as he spoke about honest work being holy work, as he transformed her humiliation into dignity. "He offered you a job, didn't he?" Catherine asked perceptively. "With his foundation?" Maria looked up, surprised. "How did you—" "He mentioned it to Principal Johnson, said he was going to make you an offer you couldn't refuse." Maria pulled out the card, looking at it. "It's an incredible opportunity. You should take it," Richard said, surprising everyone, including himself. "You should absolutely take it." "But the children will be fine," Catherine interrupted, "because we're going to start being the parents they deserve, the parents you've shown us how to be." "I don't understand." Richard leaned forward. "Maria, you've taught us something crucial. We've been outsourcing the most important job we have, raising our children. We've been paying you to love them while we pursued everything else. That changes now." "I'm taking a leave of absence from the charity boards," Catherine announced. "All of them. And Richard is cutting back to regular hours. We're going to be present," Richard added. "Really present, the way you've been." Maria felt tears flowing freely now. "I love them so much." "We know," Catherine said, taking her hand. "And they love you. That will never change. But Maria, you have a chance to help so many other families, other women like you, who are facing discrimination and hardship. You should take it. And, Richard added with a small smile, we'd like to be your first donors. The Morrison Family Foundation will contribute $1 million to Bruce Springsteen's Immigrant Family Initiative. Maria gasped. Mr. Morrison, that's too much. It's not enough, he said firmly. Not nearly enough to make up for what you've given our family. They talked late into the night, planning the transition. Maria would start with Bruce's foundation in a month, giving the family time to adjust. The Morrisons would ensure she could visit whenever she wanted, that she would be at every birthday, every holiday, every milestone. You'll always be their Miss Maria, Catherine said, and now you'll be Miss Maria to hundreds of other children who need someone to see them, to value them, to stand up for them. The next morning, Maria called the number on Bruce's card. John Landau, Bruce's manager, answered on the second ring. Maria, Bruce told me all about you. That was quite a scene yesterday. Yes, sir, it was unexpected. Bruce was really impressed. He said you handled yourself with more grace than he would have. He wants you to know the job offer is real and immediate if you want it. Maria took a breath. I want it, but I need a month to help the Morrison family transition. Done. Bruce will be pleased. He's already got ideas about programs we can implement, support systems for immigrant families, advocacy work. He wants you to lead it all. Mr. Landau, why me? There must be people with more experience, more education. Bruce said something to me yesterday after he left the school. He said, John, that woman has something you can't teach in any university. She has authentic compassion, real courage, and the kind of dignity that comes from knowing who you are, despite what the world tells you. That's what we need. Over the next month, word spread about what had happened at Family Day. The video of Bruce Springsteen defending Maria went viral, not in the modern sense of millions of views, but in the organic way that important stories spread through communities. Patricia Whitfield, in what seemed to be a genuine transformation, approached Maria at school pickup one day. I've been doing a lot of thinking, she said, her usual arrogance replaced by something like humility. My daughters haven't stopped talking about what happened. They're ashamed of me, and they're right to be. Maria waited, saying nothing. I grew up poor, Patricia admitted, the words seeming to physically pain her. In Trenton. My father was a mechanic. My mother worked at Walmart. I clawed my way up, married well, and spent every day since terrified that someone would see through me, would know I didn't really belong. So I made sure to push down anyone who reminded me of where I came from. I'm sorry you went through that, Maria said, and meant it. Patricia's eyes filled with tears. You're apologizing to me? After what I did to you? Hurt people, Maria said simply. But they can also choose to heal. Patricia nodded, wiping her eyes. I want to help. With the foundation, I want to donate, volunteer, whatever you need. Maybe I can turn my shame into something useful. Similar conversations happened throughout Rumson. The incident had held up a mirror to the community, and many didn't like what they saw. Donations poured in for Bruce's foundation. Parents who had stood silent began speaking up when they witnessed discrimination. Mrs. Henderson took early retirement. The Morrison children handled the transition with remarkable resilience. Emma started a kindness club at school, dedicated to making sure no one felt excluded. Jake presented his butterfly project at the science fair, adding a section about Maria and transformation through love. Sophie, too young to fully understand, simply told everyone that her Miss Maria was friends with Bruce Springsteen and was going to help other kids now. On Maria's last official day as their nanny, the Morrison family threw a party. Not a fancy catered affair, but a backyard barbecue with Maria's family, who had driven up from Elizabeth, and several other nannies from the neighborhood who Maria had befriended over the years. Bruce Springsteen showed up unannounced, with his guitar and a chocolate cake he'd picked up from a local bakery. Thought you might need some music, he said simply, setting up on the deck. As the sun set over the New Jersey suburbs, Bruce played while the children danced. while Maria's mother cried happy tears, while Richard Morrison actually flipped burgers instead of checking his phone, while Catherine Morrison sat on the grass with her children instead of worrying about her designer dress. "You know," Bruce said between songs, addressing the small gathering, "I've written a lot of songs about the American dream, about what it means, who gets to have it, who gets left behind. But watching Maria these past few weeks, watching how this community has started to change, I'm reminded that the dream isn't about making it to the top. It's about making sure that when you rise, you lift others with you." He looked at Maria, who was sitting with Sophie in her lap, Jake and Emma pressed against her sides. "Maria, you've been lifting these kids every single day. Now you're going to lift hundreds more. That's the real American dream. Not climbing the ladder alone, but building a bridge for others to cross." As the party wound down, the Morrison children presented Maria with a gift they'd made themselves, a photo album filled with pictures from their 2 years together. Every page was decorated with their drawings and messages. The last page had a photo from just that day, Maria surrounded by the 3 children, all of them laughing at something Jake had said. Underneath, in Emma's careful handwriting, were the words, "Family isn't about blood, it's about love. Thank you for loving us, Miss Maria. Now go love more kids who need you." Maria couldn't speak through her tears. She just held them close. These 3 children who had changed her life as much as she had changed theirs. A year later, Maria stood at a podium in a community center in Newark, addressing a room full of immigrant domestic workers. The banner behind her read, "The Springsteen Foundation for Working Families, First Annual Conference." "My name is Maria Gonzalez," she began, her voice steady and strong, her accent no longer something she tried to hide. "A year ago, I was a nanny who was told I didn't belong at my kid's school event. Today, I run a foundation that has helped place 200 immigrant workers in positions with fair wages and dignity. We've provided legal aid to 150 families, ESL classes to 300 adults, and after-school programs for 500 children." The room erupted in applause. In the front row sat the Morrison family, all 5 of them, Richard having taken the day off, Catherine volunteering as a fundraiser for the foundation. Emma, now 9 and even more confident, was wearing a T-shirt that said, "Kindness Club President." Jake, 7, was sketching butterflies in a notebook. Sophie, 5, was sound asleep against her mother's shoulder. Bruce was there too, in his usual jeans and flannel, sitting with Maria's mother, who had moved to New Jersey to be closer to her daughter and help with the foundation. "But more than the numbers," Maria continued, "we've changed hearts. We've shown that the people who care for our children, who clean our homes, who tend our gardens, we are not invisible. We are not less than. We are the backbone of our communities, and we deserve respect, dignity, and a living wage." She paused, looking at the faces in the crowd, women and men who worked hard, who sacrificed, who loved children that weren't their own, who maintained dignity in the face of dismissal. Bruce Springsteen once told me that honest work is holy work. Today, I tell you the same thing. What you do matters. Who you are matters. Your story matters. She shared her story then, the whole thing, from that humiliating day in the gymnasium to standing here now. She spoke about the children who still called her every week, about the Morrisons who had become true allies, about Patricia Whitfield, who now ran the Foundation's volunteer program with zealous dedication to making amends. "Change doesn't happen overnight," Maria said. "It happens one person at a time, one act of courage at a time, one moment of standing up instead of stepping back at a time." After her speech, as people mingled and shared their own stories, Bruce approached her. "You've grown," he said simply. "I had a good teacher," Maria replied. "No," Bruce shook his head. "You always had this in you. You just needed someone to see it. Those kids saw it. They knew your worth from the beginning." Emma ran up then, throwing her arms around Maria. "Miss Maria, Mom says we can help with the kids program this summer. I can teach them Kindness Club activities." Jake appeared with his notebook. And I can do science projects with them about butterflies and transformation. Sophie, now awake, simply attached herself to Maria's leg like she always had. "See," Bruce said with a smile, "family." As the afternoon sun streamed through the windows of the community center, illuminating the faces of workers who were finally being seen, finally being valued, Maria thought about transformation. Not just the dramatic metamorphosis of caterpillars into butterflies, but the slow, daily transformation that comes from love, from dignity, from recognition. She thought about the gymnasium at Rumson Academy, how a place of humiliation had become a place of revelation. She thought about the Morrison children, how they had stood up for her when adults wouldn't. She thought about Bruce Springsteen, how a chance encounter with a rock legend had changed the trajectory of her life. But mostly she thought about the women and men in this room, each with their own story of sacrifice and love, each deserving of so much more than they received. This was her family now, extended, complicated, beautiful. "Miss Maria," a voice called out. A young woman, maybe 20, approached hesitantly. "My name is Rosa. I'm a nanny in Short Hills. The family, they treat me like I'm nothing. Yesterday, the mother told me I couldn't eat with them, that I should eat in the kitchen like the dog." Maria felt her heart clench. She took Rosa's hands in hers. "Rosa, listen to me. You are not nothing. You are everything to those children you care for, and we're going to make sure you're treated with the dignity you deserve." She turned to the room. "This is why we're here, not just to share our stories, but to change them. Rosa, you're not alone anymore. None of us are." Patricia Whitfield, who had been setting up refreshments, overheard and approached. "Rosa, I'm Patricia. I'm a volunteer here, and I used to be the kind of person who would have treated you badly. But I learned something important. My cruelty came from my own fear, my own insecurity. The family you work for? They're probably the same. That doesn't make it right, but it helps to understand that their smallness isn't about you." Rosa looked skeptical, and rightfully so. Patricia had earned that skepticism. "I know it's hard to believe," Patricia continued, "but this foundation, it's changing things. We have lawyers who can help, mediators who can intervene, and if necessary, we have a network of families who understand the value of caregivers and will hire you with the respect you deserve." Bruce, who had been listening, pulled out his phone. "Rosa, do you like music? My friends John and Barbara Bon Jovi, they need someone to help with their kids. They're good people, they pay well, and they understand that the person caring for their children is family." Rosa's eyes widened. "Bon Jovi? Just John and Barbara to you?" Bruce smiled. "They're Jersey folks, down to earth. Their kids are great. Want me to make a call?" As Bruce stepped aside to call the Bon Jovis, Maria continued to work the room, connecting workers with resources, listening to stories, offering hope. The Morrison children helped serve food, their parents working alongside them, no longer above such tasks, but part of them. Catherine Morrison, who a year ago wouldn't have been caught dead serving food to the help, was now ladling soup and asking about people's families, their dreams, their struggles. Richard was helping people fill out forms for the Foundation's legal aid program, his business acumen finally serving a purpose beyond accumulating wealth. "Mom," Emma said, watching her parents, "you and Dad are different now." "Different how, sweetheart?" "Better. More real." Catherine hugged her daughter. "That's what happens when you stop being afraid of losing status and start being afraid of losing your soul." As the event wound down, Maria stood outside the community center, watching families head home. Some walked to bus stops, others to old cars like hers used to be, but all walked with their heads a little higher. "You did this," Bruce said, joining her. "We did this," Maria corrected. "You, me, the Morrisons, even Patricia. It took all of us." "You know what this reminds me of?" Bruce said. "It reminds me of a song I wrote years ago, The Rising. It's about coming up from darkness, about reaching for light even when the world tries to keep you down. Will you play it at next year's conference?" I'll do you one better. I'll teach it to everyone there. We'll sing it together. Hundreds of voices, all rising. A car pulled up, Maria's new car, bought with her salary from the foundation. It wasn't fancy, but it was reliable, dignified. As she prepared to leave, Sophie Morrison broke away from her parents and ran to her. "Miss Maria!" "Wait!" The 5-year-old pressed something into Maria's hand, a butterfly she'd made from construction paper, covered in glitter and held together with too much glue. "So you remember," Sophie said solemnly. "You helped us be butterflies. Now you're helping everyone be butterflies." Maria knelt down and hugged the little girl tight. "You know what, pequeña? You taught me to fly first." As Maria drove home that evening, the paper butterfly stuck to her dashboard. She thought about Bruce's words from that day in the gymnasium. Honest work is holy work. But it was more than that, she realized. Love was holy work. Standing up for others was holy work. Transforming humiliation into dignity, fear into courage, isolation into community. That was the holiest work of all. Her phone rang. It was Principal Johnson from Rumson Academy. "Maria, I have a proposition for you. We're instituting a new position, Director of Family Integration and Support. It's about making sure all families, regardless of their role, feel welcomed and valued in our community. The board voted unanimously. They want you to consider it." Maria almost laughed. "Principal Johnson, a year ago your staff tried to throw me out of Family Day. And that's exactly why we need you. You understand what it feels like to be excluded. You can help us make sure that never happens again." "I appreciate the offer, but I have work to do with the foundation." "Of course, but Maria, I want you to know, you changed us. You changed this whole community. That day in the gymnasium, it was a mirror we needed to look into." After she hung up, Maria's phone rang again. This time it was Emma Morrison calling from her mother's phone. "Miss Maria, guess what? I won the District Kindness Award. They want me to speak at the state conference about inclusion and family." "Oh, mi amor, I'm so proud of you. I'm going to tell them about you, about how you taught us that family isn't about money or where you come from. It's about showing up, about love, about seeing people for who they really are." "Emma, you knew that already. You saw me from the beginning, but you showed us how to stand up for it. That's what I'm going to teach other kids, how to stand up instead of standing by." After Emma hung up, Maria drove in peaceful silence, thinking about the ripples that spread from a single moment of cruelty transformed into courage. Patricia Whitfield was volunteering 40 hours a week, using her social connections to raise funds and awareness. The Morrisons had become one of the foundation's biggest supporters, not just financially but personally, showing up to every event. Mrs. Henderson's replacement at Rumson Academy had instituted a new curriculum on empathy and inclusion. And Bruce had written a new song inspired by that day, with proceeds going to the foundation. He'd played it on his latest tour, telling Maria's story to millions, shining a light on the invisible workers who kept America running. But the biggest change was in Maria herself. The woman who had once apologized for her accent now spoke proudly in both English and Spanish. The woman who had accepted dismissal now demanded dignity. The woman who had stood alone in that gymnasium now stood at the head of a movement. Her phone buzzed with a text from Bruce. "Maria, HBO wants to do a documentary about the foundation. They want to call it The Nanny's Courage. Interested?" Maria smiled, thinking of all the stories that needed telling, all the voices that needed amplifying. She texted back, "Only if we tell everyone's story, not just mine." "That's exactly what I told them you'd say," Bruce replied. "That's why you're perfect for this." As Maria pulled into her apartment complex, a nicer one now in a safer neighborhood, she saw her mother waiting on the balcony, probably with dinner ready. Her mother, who had cleaned houses for 30 years, who had sacrificed everything for Maria's American dream, who now helped run the foundation's childcare program with the wisdom only a grandmother could provide. "Mama," Maria called up in Spanish, "I have news." Her mother smiled down at her, that same proud smile she'd worn the day Maria got the nanny job with the Morrisons, not knowing it would lead to all this. Inside, over her mother's homemade tamales, Maria shared the day's events. Rosa's story, the HBO documentary, Principal Johnson's call, Emma's award. Her mother listened with tears in her eyes. "Mija," her mother said, "you know what you've done? You've turned pain into purpose. That's the most powerful transformation of all. I learned from you, Mama, all those years you worked, maintaining your dignity even when people tried to take it. You were my first teacher." They sat together in comfortable silence, two generations of women who had served others, who had been overlooked and undervalued, but who had never lost sight of their own worth. Maria's phone buzzed again. It was a video message from Jake Morrison. She opened it to find Jake in his room, his butterfly display visible in the background. "Hi, Miss Maria. I wanted to tell you something important. Today in science class, we were talking about metamorphosis, and I told everyone about you. I said you're like a butterfly who helped other caterpillars see they could transform too. My teacher said that was the best example of metamorphosis she'd ever heard. Also, I miss you. Also, Sophie says hi. Also, Emma is writing a book about you for her English project. Also, Mom and Dad said we can volunteer at the foundation every weekend. Also, I love you." Maria replayed the message 3 times, her heart full to bursting. She thought about responding, but decided she'd do better. She'd visit them tomorrow, surprise them with the Venezuelan hot chocolate she'd taught them to love. Later that evening, as Maria prepared for bed, she looked at herself in the mirror. The same face looked back, the same brown eyes, the same determined chin. But everything else had changed. The way she carried herself, the way she spoke, the way she moved through the world. She thought of Patricia Whitfield's words from that awful day. "The maid thinks she belongs here." "I do belong," Maria said to her reflection. "I always did. We all do." Her phone rang one more time. It was an unknown number, but she answered anyway. "Hello, is this Maria Gonzalez?" And the voice was elderly, refined, careful. "Yes, this is Maria. My name is Dorothy Whitfield. I'm Patricia's mother-in-law." Maria tensed. "What now?" "I wanted to call and thank you," Dorothy continued. "I've watched my daughter-in-law transform this past year. She's become the woman I always hoped she could be." "People can change when they choose to," Maria said carefully. "Yes, but they need a catalyst. You were that catalyst. Patricia told me the whole story. What she did to you, how you responded with such grace, how you let her join the foundation despite everything. Everyone deserves a second chance. Not everyone gives them, though. Patricia's daughters, my granddaughters, they worship you. They want to be like you when they grow up. Not like their mother was, but like you. Kind, strong, dignified. Thank you for calling, Mrs. Whitfield. That means a lot. There's one more thing. I have a lot of money, Miss Gonzalez. Old money, the kind that's been sitting in accounts for generations, doing nothing but accumulating. I'm 87 years old. I want that money to do something meaningful before I'm gone. I'm leaving $10 million to your foundation." Maria nearly dropped the phone. "Mrs. Whitfield, that's what happens when you plant seeds of kindness, Miss Gonzalez. They grow in ways you never expect. Use it well. Help more women like you. Change more hearts like Patricia's." After Dorothy hung up, Maria sat in stunned silence. $10 million. They could expand to 5 more cities, help thousands more families, create systemic change. She called Bruce immediately. 10 million! Bruce's voice was delighted. "Maria, do you understand what this means? We can create training programs, legal clinics, safe housing for workers escaping abusive situations. We can lobby for policy changes, minimum wage increases, protection laws." "It's overwhelming," Maria admitted. "Hey," Bruce's voice softened, "remember what I told you that day? You're doing holy work. This is just the universe's way of saying, keep going." The next morning, Maria woke early and drove to the Morrison house. It was Saturday, and she knew the family would be having breakfast together, a new tradition they'd started after her departure. She rang the doorbell, holding a tray of Venezuelan hot chocolate and fresh pastries from her mother. The door flew open. Sophie stood there in her pajamas, her face lighting up like Christmas morning. "Miss Maria!" she shrieked, launching herself into Maria's arms. The commotion brought everyone running. Emma and Jake piled on, creating a group hug that nearly knocked Maria over. Catherine and Richard stood in the doorway, smiling. "Maria!" Catherine exclaimed. "What a wonderful surprise! Come in, come in!" The kitchen was chaos in the best way. Richard was actually cooking pancakes, burning them slightly. Catherine was cutting fruit unevenly, and the children were helping by eating more than they prepared. "Sit, sit!" Richard insisted, pulling out a chair. "Tell us everything." Maria shared the news about Dorothy Whitfield's donation while the children listened with wide eyes. $10 million, Emma breathed. That's like... It's like being able to help every nanny, every housekeeper, every gardener in New Jersey, Jake supplied. "And beyond," Maria added. "We're going to expand to New York, Pennsylvania, Connecticut." "Can we help?" Sophie asked. "I'm good at helping." "You already do help, Pequeña. Every time you're kind, every time you stand up for someone, every time you remember that everyone deserves respect, you're helping." Catherine and Richard exchanged glances. "Maria," Richard said, "we've been discussing something. The kids have been asking, and we agree. We'd like you to be their godmother, officially." Maria's eyes filled with tears. "But I'm not... traditionally..." "Traditions change," Catherine said firmly. "You're the one who taught them their values, who showed them how to be good humans. If that's not a godmother, I don't know what is." "Say yes, Miss Maria," Emma pleaded. "Yes, yes, yes," Jake and Sophie chanted. "Yes," Maria whispered, then louder, laughing through her tears. "Yes, of course, yes." As they celebrated with hot chocolate and slightly burnt pancakes, Maria's phone rang. It was John Landau. "Maria, sorry to bother you on Saturday, but Bruce wanted me to tell you immediately. He's been invited to perform at the White House for a special event on immigrant contributions to America. He wants you to be his special guest, to speak about the foundation." "The White House," Maria repeated, and everyone in the Morrison kitchen fell silent. "The president wants to highlight programs that are making a real difference. Bruce insisted you're the one who should represent the foundation. Can you do it?" Maria looked around the table, at the children who had first seen her worth, at the parents who had learned to see it too. "Yes," she said firmly, "I can do it." After she hung up, Sophie asked solemnly, "Miss Maria, are you famous now?" Maria laughed, pulling the little girl onto her lap. "No, mi amor. I'm just someone who learned to stand up instead of stepping back. Like a butterfly," Jake added, "spreading her wings. Like a song," Emma contributed, "that starts quiet but gets louder and louder until everyone has to listen." Richard raised his coffee mug. "To Maria Gonzalez, nanny, advocate, godmother, and changer of worlds." They all raised their cups, coffee, orange juice, hot chocolate, in a toast. "To family," Maria corrected, "the kind you choose, the kind you build, the kind that sees you for who you really are." 3 months later, Maria stood in the East Room of the White House, her mother on one side, the Morrison children on the other. Bruce was on stage, guitar in hand, having just finished a powerful set about American workers. The president had just finished introducing her, calling her an example of the best of America, someone who turned personal struggle into public service, who transformed discrimination into determination. As Maria approached the podium, she saw the audience, domestic workers, immigrants, advocates, allies. She saw Patricia Whitfield in the third row, now one of the foundation's most effective fundraisers. She saw her colleagues from the foundation, the lawyers and social workers and volunteers who made their work possible. She began to speak, her voice clear and strong. 3 years ago, I was told I didn't belong in a school gymnasium because I was just a nanny. Today I stand in the White House because I am a nanny. Because being a nanny taught me about unconditional love, about showing up every day, about finding dignity in service. She talked about the foundation's work, about the thousands of families they'd helped, about the legislation they were supporting for domestic workers' rights. But mostly, she said, I want to talk about transformation. Not the dramatic kind you see in movies, but the quiet daily transformation that happens when someone sees your worth, when someone stands up for you, when someone says, you belong here. She looked at the Morrison children, who were beaming with pride. 3 children taught me I was worthy of respect. A rock star taught me that honest work is holy work. A community that once rejected me taught me that people can change. And now we're teaching America that the people who care for our children, who clean our homes, who pick our food, we are not invisible, we are essential. The applause was thunderous. The president shook her hand. Bruce hugged her. Photographers captured the moment. But the image that would stay with Maria forever was the sight of Emma, Jake and Sophie in the front row, holding a sign they'd made themselves. Our Miss Maria, changing the world, one heart at a time. After the White House event, the foundation's work exploded nationally. Maria found herself testifying before Congress, speaking at universities, being interviewed on major news programs. But she never forgot where it all started. In a gymnasium in Rumson, New Jersey, with 3 children who refused to let go of her hand. A year later, at the Foundation's 2nd annual conference, now held in a grand hotel ballroom in New York City with over 1,000 attendees, Maria stood backstage, nervous despite all her public speaking experience. Bruce appeared beside her. Nervous? Always, she admitted. Good. That means it still matters to you. He paused. You know, I've been thinking about that day in the gymnasium. I almost didn't go to that family day event. I was tired, had been touring, just wanted to stay home. But something made me go. Fate, Maria suggested. Maybe, or maybe it was just the universe deciding it was time for change, and we were the instruments it chose. Patricia Whitfield approached them, clipboard in hand. Maria, we have representatives from 12 states here, 4 senators, and more press than we can handle. Also, she smiled, my mother-in-law's estate came through, another $5 million for the foundation. Maria hugged her, this woman who had once been her tormentor and was now one of her fiercest allies. Thank you, Patricia, for everything. No, Patricia said firmly, thank you, for showing me who I could be instead of who I was. The lights dimmed, signaling it was time. Maria walked onto the stage to thunderous applause. At the front table sat the Morrison family, her mother, and dozens of the families they'd helped over the past 2 years. 2 years ago, Maria began, Bruce Springsteen told a gymnasium full of people that I was doing holy work. Today, I want to tell you all the same thing. Every person in this room who cares for others, who serves others, who loves children that aren't their own, you are doing holy work. She talked about their legislative victories. 3 states had passed domestic workers' bills of rights. She talked about their programs, legal aid, education, job placement, emergency support. She talked about the thousands of lives changed. But the real victory, she said, is that we're no longer invisible, we're no longer alone. We're a movement, a family, a force for change. She introduced speakers, domestic workers who'd escaped abusive situations, children who wanted to honor their nannies, employers who'd learned to value their household workers as family. Jake Morrison, now 9 and more confident, took the stage to present a science project he'd done on transformation, using the foundation as his example of positive change in action. Emma, 11 and poised beyond her years, read an essay she'd written that had won a national contest about American heroes. It was about Maria, but more than that, it was about all the invisible workers who kept America running. Sophie, now 7 and theatrical, performed the butterfly song Maria had taught them, now translated into a dozen languages by foundation members around the world. As the conference concluded, Bruce took the stage for the finale. But instead of performing alone, he invited Maria and 50 domestic workers to join him. "This song," he said, "is for everyone who's ever been told they don't belong, who's ever been made to feel less than, who's ever stood up anyway." They sang The Rising together, 50 voices becoming one, the words taking on new meaning. Together, their voices filled the ballroom, a chorus of the overlooked and undervalued, now standing in the light, now risen indeed. After the conference, as Maria helped clean up, old habits die hard, she found herself alone in the ballroom with Bruce. "You know what's amazing?" he said, stacking chairs. "This all started with one act of cruelty and 3 kids who wouldn't accept it. And one rock star who happened to show up," Maria added. "I didn't change anything," Bruce said. "I just held up a mirror. You and those kids, you're the ones who changed things." Maria looked around the empty ballroom, thinking of all the stories shared that day, all the connections made, all the dignity reclaimed. "We all changed things," she said, "together." 5 years after that day in the gymnasium, Maria received a call that would bring everything full circle. Emma Morrison, now 16 and a junior in high school, was giving the valedictorian speech at Rumson Academy's graduation. "Miss Maria," Emma said over the phone, "I'm dedicating my speech to you. Will you come?" Maria sat in the same gymnasium where she'd once been humiliated, now as an honored guest. The space had been transformed for graduation, but she could still see the ghost of that terrible day, could still feel the echo of those cruel words. Emma stood at the podium, poised and confident, and began to speak. "5 years ago, in this very gymnasium, I learned the most important lesson of my life. I learned that standing up for someone isn't comfortable, isn't easy, and isn't popular, but it's necessary." She talked about that family day, about watching adults she'd been taught to respect show cruelty to someone she loved. She talked about Bruce Springsteen's arrival, about the transformation that followed. "But the real hero of that day wasn't Bruce Springsteen," Emma said. "It was Maria Gonzalez, who maintained her dignity in the face of humiliation. It was my brothers and I who refused to let go of her hand. It was everyone who chose to change rather than remain comfortable in their prejudice." She looked directly at Maria. "Miss Maria taught me that family isn't about blood or money or social status. It's about showing up. It's about love. It's about seeing people for who they really are, not what they do for a living or where they come from." The gymnasium erupted in applause. Parents who had been there that day 5 years ago stood, some with tears in their eyes. New families who had heard the story stood too. Soon, everyone was on their feet, applauding not just Emma, but Maria and the change she represented. After the ceremony, Maria was surrounded by well-wishers. Mrs. Henderson's replacement, Principal Davis, shook her hand warmly. "Ms. Gonzalez, we've instituted the Maria Gonzalez Award for Dignity and Courage. It will be given annually to a student who stands up for others, even when it's difficult." Patricia Whitfield, whose own daughters were graduating, approached with her mother-in-law Dorothy, now 92 and sharp as ever. "Maria," Dorothy said, "I wanted to see you one more time, to see what my money helped build. You've exceeded every expectation." "We've helped 50,000 families across 15 states, Maria told her. "We've passed legislation in 7 states. We've changed the conversation about domestic workers nationwide." "No," Dorothy corrected, "you've changed hearts. That's much harder and much more important." As the reception continued, Jake Morrison, now 14 and towering over Maria, showed her his acceptance letter to a prestigious science camp. "I wrote about you in my application essay," he said shyly, "about transformation and metamorphosis and how change happens. They said it was one of the best essays they'd ever received." Sophie, 12 and dramatic as ever, hugged Maria tightly. "I'm playing you in the school play. We wrote it ourselves, about that day and everything that happened after. Will you come see it?" Wouldn't miss it for the world, pequeña. Richard and Catherine Morrison stood nearby, looking nothing like the distant, distracted parents they'd once been. They were present, engaged, connected to their children in ways that mattered. "Maria," Catherine said, "we owe you everything. You didn't just take care of our children. You taught us how to be parents." "You taught yourselves," Maria replied. "You just needed someone to show you what you were missing." As the evening wound down, Bruce appeared. He'd been invited to perform at the graduation party. 5 years, he mused. "Look what you've built in 5 years." "What we've built," Maria corrected. "You know," Bruce said, "I've written a lot of songs about America, about dreams and struggles and hope. But that day in this gym, and everything that's happened since, that's the real American story. Not the myth of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps alone, but the reality of people lifting each other up, changing together, becoming better together." He paused, looking around the gymnasium. "This place," he said, "it's holy ground now. Not because of what happened here 5 years ago, but because of what's happened since. Every person who's found dignity through the foundation. Every family that's learned to value their domestic workers. Every child who's learned to stand up instead of standing by. That's the real transformation." As Maria drove home that night, her mother beside her, the paper butterfly Sophie had made years ago, still on her dashboard, she thought about cycles, about endings that were really beginnings. The next morning, she would fly to Washington to meet with senators about the National Domestic Workers' Bill of Rights. Next week, she would speak at the United Nations about migrant workers' dignity. Next month, the foundation would open its 20th regional office. But tonight, she was just Maria Gonzalez, former nanny, friend to 3 extraordinary children, daughter of a proud mother, accidental activist, changer of worlds. Her phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Miss Maria, I got into Columbia, full scholarship. I'm going to study human rights law. I want to be like you, someone who turns pain into purpose, discrimination into determination. Thank you for showing me the way." Maria smiled, tears rolling down her cheeks. She thought of that woman 5 years ago, crying in a gymnasium, made to feel worthless. If she could tell that woman anything, it would be this: your worth was never determined by their words. Your dignity was never theirs to take, and your story is just beginning. The paper butterfly on her dashboard caught the streetlight, its glitter sparkling like stars, like possibilities, like dreams taking flight. "Mama," Maria said to her mother, "remember when you used to tell me that America was the land of opportunity? See, mija, you were right, but not in the way we thought. The opportunity wasn't just to work, to survive, to assimilate. The opportunity was to transform ourselves, others, the very idea of who belongs and who matters." Her mother patted her hand. "You know what you've really done, Maria. You've made visible the invisible. You've given voice to the voiceless. You've turned service into power." As they pulled into their apartment complex, they still lived in the same place, Maria insisting that staying grounded was important. Neighbors called out greetings. Many were domestic workers themselves, members of the foundation, people whose lives had been touched by the movement Maria had started. "Miss Maria," called out Carmen, who worked as a housekeeper in Short Hills. "My employer gave me a raise and health insurance today." She said the foundation's advocacy campaign opened her eyes. "Miss Maria," shouted Jorge, who worked as a gardener, "my son got the foundation scholarship. He's going to college." This was her community, her extended family, her purpose made manifest. That night, as Maria prepared for bed, she found an envelope that had been slipped under her door. Inside was a handwritten note. "Dear Maria, my name is Anna. I'm a nanny in Brooklyn. I've never met you, but you saved my life. I was being abused by my employers, trapped, afraid. Then I heard your story, found the foundation, got help. Now I have a good job, dignity, hope. You don't know me, but you changed everything for me. Thank you for standing up. Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for seeing us. Con amor y gratitud, Ana. Maria held the letter to her heart. This was why she did it. Not for the White House visits, or the congressional testimonies, or the famous friends, but for Ana, for Carmen, for Jorge, for all the domestic workers who deserved to be seen, valued, respected. Her phone rang. It was Bruce. Maria, I'm calling with news. The documentary about the foundation just won an Emmy. They want you to accept the award. Bruce, it's your documentary too. No, he interrupted. It's your story. It's the foundation's story. I was just a witness. You're the one who turned a moment of humiliation into a movement. You accept that award. You stand on that stage. You show the world what courage looks like. After they hung up, Maria stood at her window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, a nanny was tucking in children who weren't her own. A housekeeper was taking the late bus home. A gardener was planning tomorrow's work. They were all doing holy work. And now, finally, the world was beginning to see it. The paper butterfly on her nightstand, she'd moved it there for safekeeping, caught the moonlight, still glittery, still held together with too much glue, still perfect in its imperfection, like transformation itself. Messy, difficult, sometimes painful, but ultimately beautiful. Maria Gonzalez, who had once stood crying in a gymnasium while people told her she didn't belong, now stood at the center of a national movement. She had transformed, and in transforming had helped transform others. The caterpillar had become a butterfly, and she had taught others to fly. But the story doesn't end there, because transformation never really ends. It continues, rippling outward, touching lives in ways we never expect. 10 years after that day in the gymnasium, Maria stood in the Oval Office as the president signed the National Domestic Workers' Bill of Rights into law. Beside her stood the Morrison children, Emma, now a human rights lawyer, Jake, a scientist studying social transformation, Sophie, an actress who used her platform for advocacy. Bruce was there too, grayer now, but still carrying that same guitar, still singing truth to power. Patricia Whitfield was there, having become one of the nation's leading advocates for worker rights, her transformation complete and genuine. But most importantly, dozens of domestic workers were there. Nannies, housekeepers, gardeners, caregivers, no longer invisible, no longer voiceless, now protected by law, recognized by society, valued for their essential work. The president handed Maria the pen. "This is your victory," the president said. "No," Maria replied, looking at all the faces around her. "This is our victory. All of us who refuse to accept that some people matter less than others. All of us who stood up instead of stepping back. All of us who believed in transformation." As she held the pen, Maria thought of her mother, who had passed away 2 years earlier, but lived to see the foundation become a national force. She thought of Dorothy Whitfield, whose fortune had funded so much change. She thought of every cruel word spoken in that gymnasium, now transformed into this moment of triumph. But mostly, she thought of 3 children who had refused to let go of her hand when the world tried to pull them apart. Love, it turned out, was the most powerful force for change. Love, dignity, and the courage to say, "I belong here. We all belong here." The butterfly had not only spread her wings, she had helped countless others find their wings too. And they soared together, transforming the sky itself. Epilogue. 20 years later, Maria Gonzalez Morrison, she had legally added the children's surname to hers at their insistence, stood in the transformed gymnasium of Rumson Academy. It was family day again, but how different it was now. The gym was filled with families of all kinds: birth parents, adoptive parents, grandparents, nannies, au pairs, step-parents, chosen family. The banner overhead read, "Every family, every story, everyone belongs." Emma Morrison, now 38 and the head of the Human Rights Division at the UN, stood beside her with her own children, twins who called Maria Abuela. Jake, 36, had won a Nobel Prize for his work on social transformation theory, always crediting Maria as his first teacher in Metamorphosis. Sophie, 34, had just won an Oscar for her documentary about domestic workers' rights, dedicating it to my Miss Maria, who taught me that love is the most powerful force for change. Bruce, in his 80s now but still vital, sat in the front row with his guitar, ready to play the song he'd written about that day, 20 years ago, the Nanny's Courage, which had become an anthem for workers' rights worldwide. Patricia Whitfield, now in her 70s, ran the Maria Gonzalez Foundation. Maria had insisted on renaming it to honor all workers, not just herself. Her daughters had become labor lawyers, inspired by Maria's example and their mother's transformation. As Maria stepped to the podium to speak to the new generation of families, she saw in the audience a young Latina woman in a simple dress, holding the hands of 3 small children who clearly weren't hers. The woman looked nervous, uncertain, out of place. Maria caught her eye and smiled, a smile that said, "You belong here. Your work is holy. Your love matters." The woman straightened, lifted her chin and smiled back. The cycle continued. The transformation went on. Because that's what butterflies do. They spread their wings, and in spreading them teach others that they too can fly. Maria began to speak, her voice strong and clear. 20 years ago, in this very room, I learned that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's love in action. Today, I want to tell you all the same truth. Every person who loves a child, who cares for another human being, who serves with dignity, you are doing holy work. You matter, you belong, and together we can transform the world. The gymnasium erupted in applause, not just polite clapping, but a thunderous celebration of recognition, of dignity, of transformation. Outside, a butterfly landed on the window, its wings catching the light. A small reminder that change is always possible, that beauty can emerge from struggle, that sometimes the smallest things, a child's hand refusing to let go, a song sung together, a moment of standing up instead of stepping back, can change everything. And in that gymnasium in Rumson, New Jersey, where cruelty had once tried to crush dignity, love had won. Love had transformed everything. Love had given everyone wings.